Sarah Jenkins, a teenage girl, sat in the back of a sleek black car, her eyes fixed on the suburban neighborhood she was leaving behind. The car's tinted windows separated her from the world she once knew, a world of modest homes, familiar faces, and the comforting routine of family life. As the vehicle turned onto the highway, Sarah's heart sank, realizing that each mile took her further from everything she had ever known. The car pulled up to an imposing iron gate, which opened silently to reveal a sprawling estate. Sarah's eyes widened as she took in the manicured lawns, fountains, and the enormous mansion that loomed ahead. This was to be her new home, a stark contrast to the modest house she had grown up in. Samuel Hawthorne, a tall, well-dressed man with a commanding presence, greeted Sarah at the entrance. His smile was warm, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Welcome to your new home, Sarah," he said, his voice smooth and practiced. Sarah nodded silently, overwhelmed by the grandeur surrounding her. As days turned into weeks, Sarah found herself adrift in a sea of luxury. Her new bedroom was larger than her entire old house, filled with designer clothes and the latest gadgets. Yet, as she ran her hand over the silk bedspread, she felt a hollowness that no amount of expensive fabric could fill. Meals were served by a staff of silent, efficient servants. Sarah sat at a long dining table, picking at gourmet dishes she couldn't name, while Samuel talked business on his phone. The clink of silverware on fine china echoed in the cavernous dining room, emphasizing the silence between them. At school, Sarah stood out like a sore thumb. Her classmates, children of the wealthy and powerful, viewed her with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Whispers followed her in the hallways, speculation about her sudden appearance in Samuel Hawthorne's life. Sarah kept to herself, unable to bridge the gap between her past and present. One afternoon, Samuel presented Sarah with a gleaming red sports car. "It's time you learned to drive," he announced, dangling the keys in front of her. Sarah's classmates gathered around, oohing and aahing at the vehicle. For a moment, Sarah felt a spark of excitement. But as she gripped the leather steering wheel, the feeling faded, replaced by a gnawing emptiness. Sarah drove the car around the estate, its powerful engine purring beneath her. The wind whipped through her hair, and for a brief moment, she felt a sense of freedom. But as she circled back to the mansion, reality set in. The car, like everything else in her new life, was just another gilded cage. Nights were the hardest. Sarah would lie awake, staring at the ornate ceiling of her bedroom, memories of her old life flooding back. The laughter shared over simple family dinners, the warmth of her mother's hugs, even the arguments with her siblings, all seemed like distant dreams now. As weeks turned into months, Sarah's isolation grew. She went through the motions of her new life, attending classes, participating in social events, and playing the role of Samuel Hawthorne's ward. But inside, she felt like a ghost, drifting through a world that wasn't hers. Samuel remained an enigma. He was always polite, ensuring Sarah had everything she could ever want materially. But there was a distance between them, an invisible barrier that Sarah couldn't penetrate. Sometimes she caught him watching her with an unreadable expression, as if assessing an investment. Sarah's attempts to connect with her new guardian were met with deflection. Questions about her adoption, her parents, or her past were skillfully redirected. Samuel would change the subject, offer her a new gift, or suddenly remember an important business call. As her 17th birthday approached, Sarah realized that despite living in the lap of luxury for over a year, she felt more alone than ever. The sprawling mansion, with its marble floors and priceless artwork, had never felt like home. The expensive clothes in her closet were like costumes for a role she never auditioned for. Standing on the balcony of her room, overlooking the vast Hawthorne estate, Sarah made a silent vow to herself. She would find a way to uncover the truth about her situation, to understand the real cost of this golden cage she found herself in. Little did she know that this decision would set in motion a chain of events that would shake the foundations of her world and expose a web of secrets darker than she could have imagined. Years passed, and Sarah Jenkins, now a young woman in her mid-20s, had learned to navigate the opulent world she'd been thrust into. She'd become adept at playing the role of Samuel Hawthorne's successful adopted daughter, attending galas, charity events, and board meetings with practiced ease. Yet beneath the polished exterior, the questions that had plagued her as a teenager still burned. One unremarkable Tuesday morning, Sarah's carefully constructed world began to unravel. As she sorted through her mail, a plain white envelope caught her eye. No return address, just her name written in an unfamiliar hand. Curiosity piqued. She tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. As Sarah's eyes scanned the contents, her hands began to tremble. The letter contained information about her biological parents, names, dates, and a series of events that contradicted everything she'd been told about her adoption. But it was the last line that made her blood run cold. Your adoption wasn't an act of charity. It was a transaction. Sarah's mind raced. Who sent this? How did they know? And most importantly, was it true? She spent the next few days in a daze, unable to focus on work or social obligations. The letter had opened a floodgate of suppressed memories and emotions. Determined to get answers, Sarah decided to confront Samuel. She found him in his study, poring over financial reports. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Samuel looked up, his expression unreadable. "About what, my dear?" he asked, his tone casual. Sarah took a deep breath. "About my adoption, about my real parents." For a split second, something flashed in Samuel's eyes. Surprise? Fear? But it was gone so quickly, Sarah wasn't sure she'd seen it at all. He leaned back in his chair, a benign smile on his face. "Sarah, we've been through this. Your parents gave you up because they couldn't care for you. I provided you with opportunities they never could. Isn't that enough?" His words were smooth, practiced, but Sarah noticed how he sidestepped her actual questions. She pressed on, mentioning the letter, watching for his reaction. Samuel's smile never wavered, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped his pen. "Anonymous letters? Really, Sarah? I thought I raised you to be more discerning. People will say anything out of jealousy or spite. You shouldn't let such nonsense upset you." As he spoke, Samuel stood and walked around the desk, placing a fatherly hand on Sarah's shoulder. The gesture, meant to be comforting, felt heavy and constraining. Sarah realized with startling clarity that she'd never get the truth from him. The conversation ended with Samuel suggesting Sarah take a vacation to clear her head. His tone was kind, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was being managed, manipulated. As she left the study, she knew she needed help from someone outside Samuel's sphere of influence. That night, unable to sleep, Sarah scoured the internet for private investigators. She needed someone discreet, someone who wouldn't be intimidated by the Hawthorne name. After hours of research, one name stood out. Alex Reeves, a former cop turned PI, known for handling sensitive cases. Sarah met Alex at a nondescript diner on the outskirts of the city. He was younger than she expected, with keen eyes that seemed to take in everything. As Sarah explained her situation, leaving out no details, Alex listened intently, asking sharp, pertinent questions. "This won't be easy," Alex warned her. "People like Samuel Hawthorne have resources and connections. Digging into this could stir up a hornet's nest." Sarah nodded, her jaw set with determination. "I need to know the truth, no matter what." Alex studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, but there's something you should know about me. I have a personal stake in cases like yours." He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a small tattoo, a series of numbers. "I was trafficked as a kid, managed to escape, made it my life's mission to help others. If what you suspect is true, this goes way beyond a simple adoption." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Alex's revelation added a new, terrifying dimension to her suspicions, but it also cemented her resolve. She wasn't just fighting for her own truth anymore. She was potentially uncovering a system that had harmed countless others. As Sarah left the diner, her mind was a whirlwind of emotions: fear, anger, determination. She knew that by hiring Alex, she had taken the first step on a journey that would change her life forever. The comfort and security of the Hawthorne mansion now felt suffocating. The truth, no matter how painful, was out there, and Sarah was determined to find it. Little did she know that her search for answers would uncover a web of corruption, deceit, and criminal activity that reached into the highest echelons of society, putting her life and the lives of those around her in grave danger. The partnership between Sarah and Alex quickly evolved from a professional arrangement into a deep connection. As they delved into the murky details of Sarah's past, they found themselves sharing their personal histories, each revelation bringing them closer together. Alex's office became their base of operations. The small, cluttered space was a far cry from the pristine halls of the Hawthorne mansion. But Sarah found comfort in its realness. Walls covered in case files and conspiracy-style stringboards gave physical form to their investigation. As Alex pulled records and called in favors from old contacts, a disturbing picture began to emerge. Sarah's adoption wasn't just irregular, it was part of a larger pattern. Alex uncovered a trail of similar cases spanning decades, all involving wealthy, influential adoptive parents and children from struggling families. "This goes deeper than we thought," Alex said one evening, his voice grim. He spread out a series of documents on his desk. "Your adoptive father, Samuel Hawthorne, he's not just a beneficiary of this system, he's one of its architects." Sarah felt the floor drop out from under her. She'd suspected Samuel wasn't the philanthropist he claimed to be, but this was beyond anything she'd imagined. How many others?" she managed to ask. Alex's expression was pained. "Dozens that we know of, probably hundreds we don't." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. She thought of the other children at her private school, of the young men and women she'd met at society functions. How many of them shared her story? How many were living lies? As the investigation progressed, Sarah found herself spending more and more time away from the Hawthorne estate. She made excuses about volunteer work and social engagements, but she could feel Samuel's suspicion growing. The weight of her secret felt crushing. One night, unable to sleep, Sarah found herself drawn to the attic of the Hawthorne mansion. It was a space she'd rarely visited, filled with dusty furniture and forgotten mementos. As she ran her fingers over an old trunk, something caught her eye: a small, worn notebook wedged between two boxes. With trembling hands, Sarah opened it. She recognized her own childish handwriting immediately. It was a diary she'd kept in the months following her adoption, long forgotten in the chaos of her new life. As Sarah read, memories came flooding back. She'd written about her confusion, her loneliness, and her desperate attempts to please her new father. But more importantly, she'd written about the other children, kids she'd met briefly at what Samuel had called adjustment camps. Names, faces, and fragments of conversations filled the pages. Sarah realized with a start that these weren't just random acquaintances. These were other victims of the same trafficking ring that had taken her. With renewed urgency, Sarah brought the diary to Alex. As they pored over its contents, cross-referencing names and dates, the true scope of Samuel's operation began to take shape. It wasn't just about buying children. It was a complex network of favors, blackmail, and political influence. "This is big, Sarah," Alex said, his eyes wide as he connected yet another dot on their ever-growing investigation board. "We're not just talking about human trafficking. This is systemic corruption at the highest levels." Sarah nodded, a mix of determination and fear coursing through her. We need to find these other kids. Well, adults now. They might be able to corroborate our findings. As they dug deeper, the dangers of their investigation became increasingly apparent. Strange cars began appearing outside Alex's office. Sarah noticed men in suits watching her at charity events. The pressure was mounting, and both Sarah and Alex knew it was only a matter of time before someone made a move against them. Despite the growing threat, Sarah felt a sense of purpose she'd never known before. For the first time in her life, she was fighting for something real, something that mattered. The luxury of the Hawthorne lifestyle, once her gilded cage, now felt hollow and meaningless in comparison to the truth she was uncovering. One evening, as they worked late into the night, Alex turned to Sarah with a serious expression. You know we can't go back from this, right? Once we pull this thread, your whole world is going to unravel. Sarah met his gaze steadily. I know, but I can't live with the lie anymore. We need to expose this, no matter the cost. As Sarah left Alex's office that night, the weight of their discovery heavy on her shoulders, she knew she was standing on the precipice of a life-changing decision. The path ahead was dangerous and uncertain, but for the first time in years, Sarah felt truly alive. Little did she know that her next steps would not only challenge the corrupt system she'd uncovered, but also force her to confront her own identity and redefine her understanding of family, loyalty, and love. Sarah's investigation took an unexpected turn when she received a message from a name she hadn't heard in years, Lisa Chen. They had briefly crossed paths at one of Samuel's adjustment camps when they were teenagers. The memory was hazy, but Sarah recalled a quiet, frightened girl with haunted eyes. They agreed to meet at a small cafe on the outskirts of town, away from prying eyes. As Sarah walked in, she immediately recognized Lisa. Time had changed her, but the wary look in her eyes remained the same. I saw your name in the society pages, Lisa said without preamble. Couldn't believe it was you. You're living with him, aren't you? With Hawthorne? Sarah nodded, her throat tight. Lisa, I'm trying to uncover the truth about what happened to us, to all of us. Lisa's eyes darted around the cafe nervously before she leaned in. It's worse than you know, Sarah. The things I've seen, the people involved, it goes all the way to the top. Over the next few hours, Lisa shared her story. Unlike Sarah, who had been groomed for high society, Lisa had been shuffled between various sponsors, each using her for their own purposes. She'd managed to escape a few years ago and had been living under the radar ever since. But I couldn't stay silent anymore, Lisa said, her hands shaking slightly as she gripped her coffee cup. When I saw your name, I knew I had to reach out. We need to expose them, Sarah. All of them. Sarah felt a mix of relief and dread. Here was someone who understood, who had lived through the same horrors. But Lisa's experiences also confirmed her worst fears about the extent of the trafficking network. Together, they began piecing together their shared history, filling in gaps in each other's memories. Names, dates, and locations started to form a coherent picture of a vast, interconnected web of exploitation. However, as they delved deeper into their investigation, they encountered an unexpected obstacle: public perception. To the outside world, both Sarah and Lisa appeared to be success stories. Sarah was seen as the privileged adopted daughter of a philanthropist, while Lisa had reinvented herself as a rising entrepreneur. They won't believe us, Lisa said bitterly, after another fruitless attempt to contact a journalist. We're too privileged in their eyes. They can't see past the fancy clothes and the big houses. Sarah understood the frustration. She had experienced it firsthand at charity galas and social events, where her attempts to discuss serious issues were often dismissed as the whims of a bored socialite. Undeterred, they decided to take matters into their own hands. Using their connections and resources, Sarah and Lisa began reaching out to other suspected victims, slowly building a network of survivors willing to speak out. They met with Alex to discuss their progress and plan their next steps. As they sat in his office, surrounded by case files and evidence boards, the gravity of their situation became clear. "We're making waves," Alex warned, his expression serious. "I've picked up chatter that some very powerful people are getting nervous. We need to be careful." No sooner had he spoken than Sarah's phone buzzed with a news alert. A prominent politician, one they suspected of being involved in the trafficking ring, was holding a press conference. As they watched, the man vehemently denied any wrongdoing, instead painting himself as the victim of a smear campaign by ungrateful adoptees and attention seekers. The press conference was a stark reminder of what they were up against. Not just criminals, but respected members of society with the power to shape narratives and influence public opinion. "They're trying to get ahead of the story," Lisa said, her voice tight with anger. "We need to move faster," Sarah nodded, a determined set to her jaw. "We need irrefutable evidence, something they can't spin or deny." As they brainstormed their next move, a chilling realization set in. The more they pushed, the more dangerous their situation became. Sarah caught Alex watching her with concern, and she knew he was thinking the same thing. They were painting targets on their backs. But there was no turning back now. They had come too far, uncovered too much. The truth needed to come out, no matter the cost. As the meeting wound down, Sarah felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. They were standing on the precipice of something huge, something that could shake the foundations of society. But with that came enormous risk. Leaving Alex's office, Sarah and Lisa shared a look of understanding. They were in this together now, bound by shared trauma and a common goal. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side. Little did they know that their next steps would not only put their lives in danger, but also test the limits of their newfound alliance and force them to confront the deep-seated fears and trust issues left by their traumatic pasts. Sarah and Lisa's network of survivors grew steadily over the next few weeks. What started as hushed conversations and clandestine meetings evolved into a structured support group. They called themselves the Forgotten, a name that spoke to their shared experience of being treated as commodities rather than human beings. One chilly evening, Sarah hosted a secret gathering at a rented community center. The room was filled with nervous energy as 24 individuals from various backgrounds shared their stories. Some, like Sarah, had been groomed for high society. Others, like Lisa, had endured far worse fates. As the meeting progressed, a sense of solidarity began to form. These were people who understood each other's pain, who didn't need explanations or justifications. For many, it was the first time they felt truly heard. "We're stronger together," Sarah said, addressing the group. "Our individual stories might be dismissed, but united, we have a chance to be heard." The group began to formulate a plan. They would gather evidence, build a case so strong that it couldn't be ignored or swept under the rug. Each member was assigned tasks based on their skills and connections. However, as their operation grew, so did the risks. During one of their meetings, a newer member, David, failed to show up. Concern turned to panic when he didn't respond to calls or messages. 2 days later, they received a chilling video. David, looking battered and terrified, recanted everything he had told the group, claiming he had lied for attention. The video ended with a clear warning: "Stop digging, or you're next." The disappearance sent shockwaves through the group. Fear and paranoia set in. Some members wanted to back out, afraid for their safety and that of their loved ones. "We can't stop now," Lisa argued during an emergency meeting. "If we give up, they win. Everything we've been through will have been for nothing." Sarah agreed, but she could see the toll the pressure was taking on everyone. The unity they had built, was starting to fracture under the weight of fear and mistrust. To address the growing tension, Sarah decided to take a risk. She opened up about her own struggles, her doubts, and her fears. She spoke about the nightmares that still plagued her, the moments of panic when she thought she saw one of her abusers in a crowd. "I'm scared too," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But I'm more scared of staying silent. We owe it to ourselves, to David, and to all the others who can't speak out, to see this through." Her vulnerability seemed to strike a chord. One by one, others began to share their own fears and doubts. The honesty was painful but cathartic. By the end of the meeting, the group had regained its sense of purpose and unity. They implemented new security measures, creating code names and secure communication channels. Alex provided training on counter-surveillance techniques. The forgotten were no longer just victims. They were becoming a well-organized resistance movement. As their investigation deepened, they uncovered a pattern of suspicious deaths and disappearances linked to their case. People who had tried to blow the whistle in the past had met with accidents or had simply vanished. The stakes were higher than they had ever imagined. One night, as Sarah was leaving a late meeting, she felt a prickle of unease. The street seemed too quiet, the shadows too deep. She quickened her pace, her hand tightening on her phone, ready to call for help. Suddenly, a figure stepped out of an alley. Sarah's heart raced, but then she recognized Lisa's face in the dim light. "Thank God," Lisa breathed. "I've been trying to reach you. We need to move now. They know about tonight's meeting." As if on cue, the sound of screeching tires filled the air. Black SUVs appeared at both ends of the street, blocking their escape routes. Sarah and Lisa shared a brief look of understanding. Without a word, they sprinted down a narrow side street, their footsteps echoing in the night. Behind them, they could hear shouts and the sound of pursuit. As they ran, Sarah's mind raced. Who had betrayed them? How much did their enemies know? And most importantly, what would they do next? They managed to lose their pursuers in the maze-like streets of the old town, finally stopping to catch their breath in a dimly lit park. "We can't go back," Lisa panted, her eyes wide with fear and adrenaline. "It's not safe anymore." Sarah nodded, the reality of their situation sinking in. They were now fugitives, hunted by powerful people who would stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried. As the first light of dawn began to break, Sarah and Lisa made a pact. They would go underground, but they wouldn't give up. The forgotten would continue their fight, no matter the cost. Little did they know that their next steps would not only put their lives in even greater danger, but also lead them to uncover a truth more horrifying than they had ever imagined. With the threat level escalating, Sarah and Lisa knew they needed to act quickly and decisively. They couldn't risk the safety of the entire group, so they decided to take matters into their own hands. Their target: the annual Hawthorne Foundation Charity Gala, a high-profile event attended by the city's elite, including many of those they suspected were involved in the trafficking ring. Sarah, leveraging her status as Samuel Hawthorne's adopted daughter, secured invitations for herself and Lisa, who would pose as her +1. Alex, unable to attend directly, would coordinate their efforts from a nearby surveillance van. The night of the gala arrived, the opulent ballroom of the Hawthorne mansion glittering with chandeliers and filled with the murmur of high society small talk. Sarah, dressed in a stunning gown, felt a chill as she entered the familiar space. This time, she saw it through new eyes, recognizing the facade of philanthropy that masked darker intentions. Lisa, elegant but clearly uncomfortable in her borrowed finery, whispered, "I can't believe I'm back here. It feels like walking into the lion's den." Sarah squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Remember the plan. We're here to gather information, not confront anyone directly." They split up, mingling with the crowd, their ears tuned for any useful snippets of conversation. Sarah found herself locked in a tedious discussion about golf with the senator when she overheard something that made her blood run cold. "The latest shipment is arriving next week," a voice said in hushed tones. "We need to make sure the paperwork is ironclad this time. We can't afford another close call." Sarah recognized the speaker as James Holloway, a prominent businessman and close associate of Samuel's. She casually shifted her position to get a better view of who he was talking to. To her shock, she saw the familiar face of Detective Michael Reeves, the lead investigator who had been assigned to look into their allegations. The same detective who had dismissed their evidence as circumstantial just weeks ago. Sarah's mind raced. The corruption ran deeper than they had imagined, reaching into law enforcement itself. She needed to get this information to Lisa and Alex immediately. As she tried to move away, she felt a hand on her arm. "Sarah, darling." Samuel's voice boomed. Too loud, too cheerful. "There's someone I'd like you to meet." Sarah's heart pounded as Samuel steered her towards James Holloway and Detective Reeves. She forced a smile, playing the role of the dutiful daughter while her mind screamed danger. "Gentlemen, you remember my daughter Sarah," Samuel said, his grip on her arm tightening imperceptibly. As the men exchanged pleasantries, Sarah caught a look passing between Samuel and Holloway. It was brief, but loaded with meaning. They knew. Somehow, they knew she was onto them. Across the room, Lisa had been recording conversations using a hidden microphone. She had managed to capture several incriminating exchanges when she noticed Sarah's predicament. Recognizing the danger, Lisa decided to create a diversion. With a deliberately clumsy movement, Lisa bumped into a waiter, sending a tray of champagne glasses crashing to the floor. The noise drew everyone's attention, giving Sarah the opportunity to slip away from Samuel and the others. Sarah quickly made her way to Lisa, and under the guise of helping clean up the mess, they exchanged information in hurried whispers. "We need to get out of here," Sarah murmured. "They're onto us." Lisa nodded, her face pale. "I got some recordings, but I don't know if it's enough." Just then, Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Alex. "Get out now. Security is mobilizing." Heart racing, Sarah scanned the room. She saw Samuel in deep conversation with several men, including Detective Reeves, all of them wearing grim expressions. Security guards were beginning to position themselves near the exits. "We need a distraction," Sarah said, her mind working furiously. "Something big enough to cause chaos but not hurt anyone." Lisa's eyes widened as an idea struck her. "The fire alarm. It's our only shot." Without waiting for a response, Lisa slipped away, moving towards the back of the ballroom. Moments later, the shrill sound of the fire alarm cut through the elegant music and conversation. Panic ensued as guests rushed towards the exits. In the chaos, Sarah and Lisa managed to slip away, ducking into a service corridor they had scouted earlier. They ran through the winding passages of the mansion, their elegant heels discarded for the sake of speed. Behind them, they could hear shouts and the sound of pursuit. As they burst out of a side entrance, Alex was waiting in the van, engine running. They dove in, and the van peeled away just as security guards emerged from the building. "Did you get it?" Alex asked, tensely, as he navigated through the city streets, constantly checking the rearview mirror for signs of pursuit. Sarah nodded, breathless. "We got recordings, overheard conversations, and we found out Detective Reeves is involved." The gravity of their discovery settled over the van. They had the evidence they needed, but they had also just made themselves targets of some of the most powerful people in the city. As they drove into the night, Sarah looked back at the glittering lights of the Hawthorne mansion, receding in the distance. She knew that her life would never be the same. The comfortable facade had been shattered, replaced by a dangerous reality. But as she looked at Lisa and Alex, She felt a surge of determination. They had taken a huge risk, but they were one step closer to exposing the truth. The real fight was just beginning. With their hard-won evidence in hand, Sarah, Lisa, and Alex knew they needed to act fast. The recordings and information they had gathered at the gala were explosive, but they also knew that their enemies would stop at nothing to discredit or silence them. "We need to get this information out to the public," Sarah said, her voice firm despite the exhaustion evident on her face. "But we can't just post it online. They'd bury it before anyone important saw it." Lisa nodded in agreement. "We need someone with credibility, someone who can't be easily silenced or bought off." Alex, who had been quiet for a while, suddenly spoke up. "I might know someone. Melissa Chen, investigative reporter for the City Tribune. She's got a reputation for hard-hitting exposés, and she's not afraid to go after the big fish." The next day, they arranged a meeting with Melissa at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. As they waited, Sarah couldn't help but feel exposed, constantly scanning the room for any sign of threat. Melissa arrived right on time, a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes and a demeanor that suggested she had seen her fair share of dangerous situations. After brief introductions, they got straight to business. "What you're alleging is significant," Melissa said, after listening to their story and examining some of their evidence. "But you have to understand, these are powerful people you're accusing. I need to be absolutely certain before I put my name on this story." Sarah leaned forward, her eyes intense. "We understand the risks. We've lived them. But this story needs to be told. People need to know the truth." For the next few hours, they went through their evidence piece by piece. The recordings from the gala, financial records they had managed to obtain, testimonies from other survivors. Melissa listened intently, asking probing questions and taking copious notes. As the meeting drew to a close, Melissa sat back, a thoughtful expression on her face. "You've got a solid foundation here," she admitted. "But I need more. Corroborating evidence, additional sources. I can't run this on your word alone, no matter how compelling your story is." Sarah felt a mix of frustration and understanding. They had hoped for an immediate breakthrough, but she knew Melissa was right. A story this big needed to be airtight. "How long do you need?" Lisa asked, a hint of desperation in her voice. Melissa considered for a moment. "Give me a week. I'll do some digging on my end, see if I can verify some of this independently. If it checks out, we'll move forward." As they left the cafe, the gravity of their situation settled over them once again. They had taken a huge risk in trusting Melissa, and now all they could do was wait. The next week was tense. Sarah, Lisa, and Alex continued their investigation, always looking over their shoulders, always wary of being followed or monitored. They provided Melissa with any additional information they could find, hoping it would be enough to convince her to run the story. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Melissa contacted them for another meeting. This time, her expression was grim as they sat down. "I've corroborated a significant portion of your evidence," she began, and Sarah felt a surge of hope. But Melissa wasn't finished. "The problem is, my editor is hesitant to run the story. The legal risks are enormous, and there's pressure from above to drop it." The news hit them like a physical blow. They had been so close, only to be thwarted by corporate interests and the fear of legal repercussions. "So that's it?" Lisa asked, her voice tight with anger and disappointment. "They just get away with it?" Melissa held up a hand. "I didn't say that. I believe in this story, and I believe you. But if we're going to do this, we need to make it undeniable. We need something that will make it impossible for them to ignore or bury." Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself. "What do you need?" "A face," Melissa replied. "Someone willing to go on record, to be the human element of this story. Numbers and recordings can be disputed or explained away, but a real person, telling their story. That's harder to ignore. The implication hung heavy in the air. Sarah and Lisa exchanged a long look, understanding the enormous risk such a move would entail. Going public would paint a target on their backs, exposing them to potential retaliation from the very people they were trying to bring down. "I'll do it," Sarah said finally, her voice quiet but determined. "I'll tell my story." Lisa grabbed her hand, squeezing it tightly. "We'll do it together," she corrected. "Two voices are stronger than one." Melissa nodded, a mix of respect and concern in her eyes. "Are you sure? Once we do this, there's no going back. Your lives will never be the same." Sarah looked at Lisa, then at Alex, drawing strength from their presence. "Our lives haven't been our own for a long time," she said. "It's time we took them back, not just for us, but for all the others who can't speak out." As they began to plan the interview, Sarah felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. They were about to step into the spotlight to challenge some of the most powerful people in the city. It was terrifying, but it also felt right. This was the moment they had been working towards, the chance to finally bring the truth to light. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The day Melissa's expose hit the newsstands, it sent shockwaves through the city. The front page of the City Tribune bore the headline, "Adoption or Abduction? The Dark Truth Behind the Hawthorne Foundation," with Sarah and Lisa's faces prominently featured. The article laid bare the horrifying details of the trafficking ring, backed by financial records, witness testimonies, and Sarah and Lisa's own harrowing accounts. The public reaction was immediate and intense. Social media exploded with outrage, calls for justice, and messages of support for the survivors. News channels ran the story nonstop, dissecting every detail and bringing in experts to comment on the implications. For Sarah and Lisa, the aftermath was a whirlwind. Their phones rang incessantly with calls from other news outlets seeking interviews, their inboxes filled with messages from other survivors coming forward with their own stories, emboldened by Sarah and Lisa's bravery. But amidst the support, there was also backlash. Samuel Hawthorne and his associates quickly launched a counteroffensive, issuing statements that painted Sarah and Lisa as troubled, attention-seeking individuals, fabricating stories for personal gain. They threatened legal action against the City Tribune and anyone else who propagated what they called malicious lies. The pressure was intense, and it wasn't long before Sarah and Lisa started feeling the heat. One morning, Sarah woke up to find her car vandalized, the words "liar" spray-painted across the hood. Lisa received anonymous threats via email, warning her to retract her story or else. Alex, ever vigilant, insisted on upgrading their security measures. "They're scared," he said as he installed new locks on their doors. "That means we're getting to them, but it also means they're dangerous." Despite the threats, Sarah and Lisa pressed on. They gave interviews, spoke at rallies, and worked tirelessly to keep the story in the public eye. Their goal was clear. They wanted justice, not just for themselves, but for all the victims of the trafficking ring. As public pressure mounted, politicians who had once been friendly with Samuel Hawthorne began to distance themselves. Calls for official investigations grew louder, and soon, the Attorney General's office announced that they would be looking into the allegations. But just as it seemed they were making real progress, disaster struck. One evening, as Sarah was returning home from a late-night strategy meeting with Melissa and Alex, she found her apartment door ajar. Heart pounding, she cautiously entered, only to find the place ransacked. Papers were strewn everywhere, drawers upended, and her laptop was missing. Panic set in as Sarah realized the implications. That laptop contained sensitive information about their investigation, including the names and contact details of other survivors who had come forward. If it fell into the wrong hands, it could put countless lives at risk. She immediately called Alex and Lisa, warning them to be on high alert. As they converged on her apartment, the gravity of the situation sank in. This wasn't just about intimidation anymore. Their enemies were actively trying to undermine their efforts and potentially harm those they were trying to protect. "We need to go dark," Alex said firmly, his eyes scanning the destroyed apartment for any signs of surveillance devices. "They're escalating, and we don't know how much they know or what they're planning next." Lisa nodded in agreement, her face pale but determined. "I'll contact the others, warn them to be careful. We can't risk anyone else getting hurt because of us." As they formulated a plan to secure their remaining evidence and protect their sources, Sarah couldn't help but feel a mixture of fear and determination. They had known this wouldn't be easy, but the reality of the danger they faced was finally sinking in. Just then, Sarah's phone buzzed with a news alert. Her blood ran cold as she read the headline: "Key witness in Hawthorne case found dead in apparent suicide." The name in the article was familiar. It was one of the survivors who had recently come forward to corroborate their story. The official report claimed it was suicide, but Sarah knew better. This was a message, a brutal reminder of what their enemies were capable of. The room fell silent as Sarah shared the news. The weight of responsibility and the cost of their actions pressed down on them. They were no longer just fighting for justice. They were fighting for their lives and the lives of those who had trusted them. "What do we do now?" Lisa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself. "We keep fighting," she said firmly. "We owe it to everyone who's risked everything to help us. We can't back down now." Alex nodded, a grim determination in his eyes. "I have some contacts from my days on the force, people who owe me favors. It's time to call them in. We need all the help we can get." As they left Sarah's apartment, slipping away into the night to regroup and plan their next move, the city buzzed with the unfolding drama. Unbeknownst to them, their story had sparked a fire that was rapidly spreading beyond their control. The battle lines were drawn, and the true test of their resolve was about to begin. With the stakes higher than ever, Sarah, Lisa, and Alex knew they needed to take drastic action. They couldn't fight this battle alone anymore. It was time to bring in reinforcements and launch an all-out offensive against Samuel Hawthorne and his network. Alex reached out to his old contacts in law enforcement, carefully vetting each one to ensure they weren't compromised. Meanwhile, Sarah and Lisa worked tirelessly to organize the growing network of survivors and supporters. They set up secure communication channels, established safe houses, and created contingency plans for every possible scenario. Their goal was ambitious: to orchestrate a coordinated expose that would bring down the entire trafficking ring in one fell swoop. They planned to hit Samuel and his associates from all angles: legal, financial, and public relations. "We need to make it impossible for them to wiggle out of this," Sarah explained during a strategy meeting. "If we hit them hard enough and fast enough, they won't have time to cover their tracks or silence more witnesses." The plan was risky. It required perfect timing and flawless execution. One misstep could spell disaster, not just for them, but for everyone involved in the operation. As the day of reckoning approached, tension ran high. Sarah found herself unable to sleep, plagued by nightmares of everything that could go wrong. Lisa threw herself into last-minute preparations, double and triple checking every detail. Alex maintained a calm exterior, but his constant vigilance betrayed his anxiety. The night before the operation, Sarah stood on the balcony of their temporary safe house, staring out at the city lights. She felt a presence behind her and turned to see Alex joining her. "Having second thoughts?" he asked quietly. Sarah shook her head. "No, but I'm scared. Not just for us, but for everyone who's risked everything to help us. What if we're wrong? What if this doesn't work?" Alex was silent for a moment before responding. "You know, when I was a cop, My partner used to say something before every big bust. He'd say, "Courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and doing it anyway." He turned to face Sarah, his expression serious. "What we're doing, it's bigger than us. It's about justice, about protecting the vulnerable. We might be afraid, but we're doing the right thing." Sarah nodded, drawing strength from his words. As the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, she felt a sense of resolve settling over her. Whatever happened next, they were in this together. The day of the operation dawned bright and clear. Sarah, Lisa, and Alex gathered their team for one final briefing. The room was filled with a mix of survivors, journalists, lawyers, and trusted law enforcement officers. Each person had a crucial role to play in the coming hours. "Remember," Sarah addressed the group, her voice steady despite her nerves, "timing is everything. We need to hit them from all sides simultaneously. Don't give them a chance to regroup or retaliate." As the meeting concluded, Lisa pulled Sarah aside. "Whatever happens today," she said, her eyes shining with unshed tears, "I want you to know that meeting you, fighting alongside you, it's given me a purpose I never thought I'd have." Sarah hugged her tightly, words failing her in the face of such raw emotion. This journey had forged a bond between them that went beyond friendship. They were sisters in arms, united by shared trauma and a common goal. The operation began at precisely 10 a.m. Across the city, carefully coordinated events unfolded in rapid succession. A team of lawyers filed a massive class action lawsuit against the Hawthorne Foundation and its associates. Investigative journalists from multiple outlets released a series of damning exposés, each building on and corroborating the others. Federal agents, armed with meticulously gathered evidence, conducted simultaneous raids on key locations tied to the trafficking ring. A group of hackers, working anonymously, released a trove of incriminating documents online, making them impossible to suppress. Sarah, Lisa, and Alex monitored the situation from their command center, coordinating efforts and responding to unexpected developments. The adrenaline was palpable as reports began flooding in. Initial results were promising. Samuel Hawthorne and several high-ranking associates were taken into custody. The stock price of companies linked to the trafficking ring plummeted. Social media exploded with the unfolding drama, putting immense public pressure on authorities to take action. But as the day wore on, the backlash began. Lawyers for the accused launched aggressive counterattacks, attempting to discredit witnesses and suppress evidence. There were reports of key documents going missing and witnesses suddenly recanting their statements. As night fell, Sarah, Lisa, and Alex found themselves at a crucial juncture. They had landed a significant blow, but the fight was far from over. The next few hours would determine whether their efforts would lead to lasting change or be swept under the rug like so many attempts before. With determination in their eyes and steel in their spines, they prepared for the next phase of their battle. The truth was out there, and they were ready to do whatever it took to ensure justice was served. As the operation entered its critical phase, Sarah, Lisa, and Alex worked tirelessly to maintain the momentum they had built. The command center was a hive of activity, with phones ringing constantly and screens displaying real-time updates from various fronts of their battle. Sarah was coordinating with the legal team when an urgent message came through. A key witness, someone high up in Samuel's organization, was willing to testify in exchange for immunity. This could be the breakthrough they needed to solidify their case. "We need to move on this now," Sarah said, her voice tense with urgency. "Alex, can you arrange secure transport for the witness?" Alex nodded, already reaching for his phone. "I'll handle it personally. We can't risk using anyone we're not absolutely sure about." As Alex left to make arrangements, Lisa approached Sarah with a troubled expression. "Sarah, there's something you need to see," she said, handing over a tablet. Sarah's eyes widened as she read the document on the screen. It was a detailed dossier on Alex, revealing a connection she never knew existed. Alex was the son of Senator James Reeves, one of the politicians they suspected was deeply involved in the trafficking ring. "This can't be right," Sarah muttered, her mind reeling from the implications. "Alex has been with us from the beginning. He's risked everything." Lisa nodded grimly. "I know, but we can't ignore this. What if he's been playing us this whole time?" The weight of the situation pressed down on Sarah. Alex had been their rock, their protector throughout this ordeal. The thought that he might be working against them was almost too much to bear. But they couldn't afford to let personal feelings cloud their judgment, not when they were so close to their goal. "We need to confront him," Sarah said finally. "But we do it carefully. If he is innocent, we can't risk alienating him now. And if he's not, we need to be prepared." They waited tensely for Alex's return, the atmosphere in the command center growing thick with unspoken suspicion. When Alex walked in, his expression changed immediately, sensing the shift. "What's going on?" he asked, looking between Sarah and Lisa. Sarah took a deep breath. "Alex, we need to talk. There's something you haven't told us about your family." Alex's face went pale, then hardened. "You've been investigating me," he said, his voice flat. "We had to be sure," Lisa interjected. "This whole operation depends on trust, and we've just found out you're connected to one of the key players we're trying to bring down." For a moment, the room was silent, the tension palpable. Then Alex spoke, his voice low and intense. "Yes, Senator Reeves is my father, but that's precisely why I'm here, fighting alongside you. I've seen firsthand the corruption, the evil that men like him are capable of. I've spent years trying to gather evidence, to find a way to bring him down." He looked directly at Sarah, his eyes pleading for understanding. "I didn't tell you because I was afraid you wouldn't trust me if you knew. But everything I've done, every risk I've taken, has been to stop men like my father from hurting more people." Sarah studied Alex's face, searching for any sign of deception. She had always prided herself on her ability to read people, a skill honed by years of navigating the treacherous waters of high society. In Alex's eyes, she saw pain, determination, and a desperate need for them to believe him. "Why should we trust you now?" Lisa asked, her voice hard. Alex reached into his pocket and pulled out a flash drive. "Because I have the final piece of evidence we need. Recordings of my father and Samuel Hawthorne discussing the trafficking operation. I've been waiting for the right moment to use it." Sarah's mind raced. If what Alex was saying was true, this could be the key to bringing down the entire network. But if it was a trap, they could be walking right into it. In that moment, Sarah made a decision that would shape the course of their entire operation. She chose to trust Alex. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "We use the evidence, but from now on, no more secrets. We're in this together, all the way." Alex nodded, relief washing over his face. "Thank you," he said softly. "I won't let you down." As they turned their attention to the flash drive, preparing to incorporate this new evidence into their case, Sarah felt a mix of emotions. Fear, hope, determination, and something else. A realization that in this crucible of danger and high stakes, she had found something she never expected, a true family. The next few hours would determine the success or failure of their entire mission. But whatever the outcome, Sarah knew that she, Lisa, and Alex were bound together by something stronger than blood, a shared purpose, and an unbreakable trust forged in the fire of their struggle for justice. As they worked to integrate the new evidence and prepare for the final push, Sarah allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The road ahead was still fraught with danger, but for the first time since this journey began, she felt a glimmer of hope. They were close, so close to bringing the truth to light and achieving the justice they had fought so hard for. With renewed determination, Sarah turned back to her team. "Let's finish this," she said, her voice ringing with conviction. "It's time to end this once and for all."